It is officially postseason week across the NFL, and of course, right here in Baltimore, we're gearing up for the rematch, the wild card rematch between the Baltimore Ravens and, of course, the Cincinnati Bengals at Paycor Stadium in Cincinnati. Primetime football coming up, Sunday night slate, and it's all on the line in terms of, hey, you either win or you begin golf season early here in the offseason. Welcome into the Ravens Vault podcast. I'm Bobby Trossett, joined by my co-host and partner, Sarah Ellison. And partner, we got a lot to get to over the course of the next hour or so, including a one-on-one conversation that I had with Jay Morrison of The Athletic in Cincinnati. And I think we should start there because it's been a week full of essentially war of words between these two teams. There's a lot of bad blood. Cincinnati began their sort of post-game endeavors, if you will, last weekend, calling out the Ravens for the way they played, calling it cheap, calling it dirty, and another number of other obscenities in there. So what have we made of all this, and how much do we think it's actually going to leak into Sunday night?
I mean, it's definitely fun, right, to have genuine dislike again. It definitely calls back to the Ravens-Steelers days, but it's a different dislike this time, whereas like Ravens and Steelers, like both sides knew they were coming in and hitting hard. And then this time it's like one side is bringing the AFC North heat that, as far as I can tell, is clean. Maybe one that maybe was questionable, but nothing too bad. And that's the Roquan side bump to Jamar Chase. But what's different about the dislike is that one side is whining about the physicality, and that's the Bengals side. It's just like, again, the closest thing was the Roquan Smith side bump into Jamar Chase. And if that is what you're worried about, like that doesn't even come close to some of the hard hitting that would come in those Ravens Steelers games. Doesn't even come close. So it's just like, but what's funny about it, which I know you get into with your interview with Jay, I wasn't available for this one, so you did a great job with it, and I'm excited for everybody to hear it. But as he pointed out, it was originally the defensive players that were talking about it being cheap, not the offensive players. And I don't see anything on the offensive players of the Ravens doing anything close or remotely cheap. I've seen, Bobby, there's the Cincinnati Bengals content creators, kind of like us, that have scoured through tape and then put stuff up as if that's the cheap stuff. And I'm like, really? Like, that's it? That's what you got? I think one was just after a hard hit and somebody was having a hard time getting up, and Roquan had grabbed the ball and is like nodding his head up and down as if you can't celebrate. Like, he wasn't celebrating the injury. I don't even think he saw the injury. And it's like, that's the best you've got? You scoured tape for the last 2 days and this is what you got? Nothing cheap or dirty about it. But all that talk has certainly elevated things.
Let's go inside the locker room, around the locker room, in terms of what the Ravens had to say about all this noise, really, because all it is noise. And if it's anything more than that come Sunday night, that ain't going to be good for either team. But here's how some of the Ravens responded to all the noise in Cincy.
We'll see Sunday night. If it's smoke, it's smoke. I mean, we ain't running from nobody. If y'all feel like people was doing stuff dirty and y'all weren't at the same time, then, I mean, you could look at film in the past from what they was doing and stuff too. So, I mean, at the end of the day, whoever got beef with each other, they got beef with each other. But at the end of the day, we going out there to play a football game. We ain't trying to do nothing extra, but we got a job to do.
I'm not an official, and the officials didn't make no calls, so I don't see anything wrong with what went on and took place the last time we played them.
How did you perceive that game? Was it chippier than as a game as you expect? Did you see anything that you felt like crossed the line?
See you Sunday. Night. Absolutely.
Sarah, we both watched that press conference live, and my gosh, that ear-to-ear grin that Roquan had there at the very end of that clip was worth going back to look at if you didn't have a chance to check out that press conference. He understands.
Who was the second quote? The PQ was first. Roquan was last. Who was second?
Well, the second was funny too, right? Broderick Washington's like, yo, I'm not an official. Everything was clean, bro.
It's Washington. All right.
Yeah. Who's having a heck of a year, by the way.
Yeah.
I was just saying, I think Roquan is a tone setter. And the rest of this defense, the rest of the team follows. That's just the bottom line now. He's your defensive franchise guy. He's been paid like it this week. And I think he's going to act like it again under the primetime lights.
Yeah, I can't wait for it. And so what's nice, though, I'll transition here into your interview with Jay. You appreciate his neutrality here because he said he also scoured the tapes and didn't see anything. So listen, I'm all for Cincinnati getting the memo of what AFC North football is all about. So if they want to raise the level of their hitting to AFC North football, let's do it. Let's do it. What we don't want is any real dirty or cheap plays, because there were no real dirty or cheap plays. So we don't need a retaliation to the point where you are starting to play dirty and put, injuries on the line. So raise the level. Let's get to AFC North level, but let's not for real get cheap.
That'll take away from the integrity of the game, the entertainment value of the game, all that stuff. We don't need that. There's too much on the line. I did want to share 2 more clips before we toss to my interview with Jay, just for more context purposes, because the Ravens weren't the only ones talking, and essentially they were talking in response to all of the noise from Sunday on Wednesday. But Jamar Chase also did his fair share of talking on Wednesday, as he did post-game as well. And he was mentioned in this exchange with reporters. He was asked about Roquan Smith.
The one where Joe missed in the end zone, There was one. Do you feel like that they were trying to set some kind of a tone?
Dude, he did that on purpose. It's all right. We got something for that.
Does that stuff bother you?
Nah.
Did you notice that throughout the team, them trying to play that way?
No, he was the only one trying to do messy stuff.
Sarah, earlier this week, and even at the top of the show, you called it whining, right, from what's been coming out of Cincinnati. And at the time, earlier this week, I was kind of like, I don't know if I'm with that. I maybe. Now I totally see what you were saying. If you watch
you
this
see
clip,
the light.
Yeah, I do see it now. It's ridiculous. Like, I think I called it like chirping earlier in the week. No, it's whining. Go back and watch the clip of Jamar with reporters. He's got this sour puss on his face, and it's almost as if he feels so slighted by whatever happened, whether it was the Roquan play itself or anything else between the whistles. He just feels it's like this sense of entitlement. And then he takes this shot at Daryl Worley, who, by the way, had a heck of a game, I thought, at the cornerback position for the Ravens. They needed the depth on Sunday in the regular season finale without Marcus Peters. And listen to the cheap, speaking of cheap, how about this cheap shot on Daryl Worley here?
I don't even know his name. 41, the corner from last game. I don't really know his name. He was trying to be a little physical, even though he looked like a safety / linebacker at corner. So that was probably, the only person really trying to be physical at the line of scrimmage.
Sarah, I don't know if it's because they're the reigning AFC championship team or whatever, but there is this weird sense of entitlement that I'm kind of getting at here.
This is exactly what fans say, that the Bengals don't know how to handle success. And it's like, that right there, really? Like, you're going to put out, I don't even know his name, da-da-da-da. And like, Jamar definitely got, his catches on Worley. But I agree with you. I think that Worley had a good game based off of the expectations that you have, that he's, been a career kind of practice squad guy, and then he's been on IR for a while, and then he came in with all the energy in the world. Like he was like, this is it, this is my game. And I thought, he played well. But yeah, it's just the way that Chase is doing it, that he's just like, no, it doesn't bother me, but we got something for that. Oh, okay. Like, I don't even really know his name. It's like, I like the way PQ and Roquan, and we didn't play it, but Mark Andrews, it's just such a more like, there's no veiled threats from the Ravens, right? They're just like, let's just lace them up on Sunday. Let's go. And if you got smoke, you got smoke. If you got beef, you got beef. Here we go. And let's just play on Sunday. And whereas these guys, it's just all these veiled threats, right? No, it doesn't bother me, but yeah, we got something about it. Oh, I don't even know his number. And it's just like, come on, like it's, and the other quote, which was before Wednesday last week, they were like, I can't wait to send him home. Like, there's just no, I guarantee it's like Ravens players are aware of it. They're definitely going to be fighting with one hand behind their back without Lamar, most likely. But even Lamar, even on Twitter, though, he liked PQ's quote, that he's like, if it's smoke, it's smoke. Let's go. We're ready for it Sunday. So Ravens players are hearing it. They're definitely going to be fighting with one arm behind their back without Lamar, but I'm telling you, Bobby, even without Lamar, these defenders are gonna pound these guys just like they did last week, and it will not be dirty, but they will pound them and beat them up. Even if they do advance, they're going to be hurting by the end of this game.
More on the current Ravens quarterback situation on the other side of what's about to come, this Jay Morrison conversation that I had earlier this week. But sure seems like Jamar and a couple other players are bothered by whatever's happening here in the aftermath of Sunday. But I'm expecting it to be a bloodbath for all the marbles come Sunday night. There's going to be high entertainment value in this one. But let's get to my conversation with Jay as promised. Again, his piece on The Athletic is what kind of got this whole conversation started. He did not have an agenda, as you'll learn. I just kind of wanted to nip it in the bud right away, Sarah, right off the top of this interview in terms of, okay, how did this story come to be? Because as you'll sort of hear, he had to do an audible. Obviously, writers have priorities and plans in mind after a game ends in terms of what they're going to lead with, what they're going to roll with. But as you'll find, as soon as he got into the locker room, he kind of had to punt on that initial idea after the Bengals game. So anyway, without further ado, here is my conversation with the Athletics' Jay Morrison here on The Vault. Okay, Jay, you know where we're beginning this thing with, because your piece has certainly wreaked some havoc this week in between the Ravens and Bengals fan base. But hey, all of it was true stuff and certainly not fabricated. So, first and foremost, I think when there's written quotes versus when players actually meet with the media, in person, and obviously it ends up being on camera, I think there's a difference. Some things can get taken out of context, right? So some of these quotes are legit. I mean, dirty, cheap, you name it. What's your takeaway, and what was the tone used from some of these players who did speak up in the aftermath of the Week 18 regular season finale?
Yeah, so to take you inside the locker room, I went down, and the first person I went to was DJ Reader, because he's usually one of the best guys to talk to, and my focus was to talk to these guys about how unique it's going to be to see the same offense 2 weeks in a row, and how are they approaching that. And the first question I asked DJ is, he said, "I don't really know." And then he gave the quote about, "I have respect for some guys over there, and I don't have respect for some guys over there." And then he gave one more kind of inflammatory quote, and he said, "That's all I got." And he walked away. And so I immediately pivoted. I was like, well, this is interesting. So when I talk to other players with other media around, you kind of go with the standard quotes, and I would wait them out until the other media left. And when I got them one-on-one, I would say, "Hey, DJ said this, what's he talking about?" And then they would light into the Ravens. And so I think, if there were cameras around, that may not have happened. They may not have been so open to say what they said, but because it was just me one-on-one, I've covered the team for a long time. It's not like they trusted me not to write it. They wanted it written, but it was interesting. And I don't quite get where it's coming from. They say it in the moment, and you got to write it. And then you go back and you watch the game, and this was all defensive players I talked to. So I'm like, well, is the Ravens O-line doing some stuff under the pile, or what are they talking about? And I go back, I watch the game, and I see a couple instances where the Bengals do this a lot. Their defense holds guys up and then tries to rip the ball out. And there was a couple times when that was happening that some Ravens O-lineman would come and deliver some late blocks to try to pick those guys off. Fair game, if you ask me, but I could see where they would take exception as well. So I almost wonder, there were, Roquan Smith gave Jamar Chase the little shoulder shiver in the end zone after the pass breakup. There was some after the whistle stuff like that. Nothing egregious, but just some things like that. But then I wonder, usually the Bengals defense is sitting on the bench and they're not really watching what the offense is doing. So I'm with John Harbaugh here. I'm a little confused where this animosity is coming from, unless it was under the pile stuff that was just out of view of cameras.
That's where I was going next, because like you, I went back and watched some of this game, and I'm thinking to myself, okay, Roquan was playing with his hair on fire. I think he knew that an extension was looming, right? So the guy was just sideline to sideline all over the field. Of course, you had that big Darryl Worley hit, a legal hit on T. Higgins coming across there. But other than that, and to your point, every single member who was quoted for something that kind of spiked the internet a little bit was a defensive member of the Bengals. So I don't know where this stems from as well. I wonder if there's just bad blood in general. I wonder if they're trying to light this team on fire, their peers on fire ahead of the rematch, or maybe they're just pissed off. I mean, you've covered this team for a long time, including this year, and I'm sure it's been a 2 weeks unlike any other, given the scenarios that were in play from the NFL and the aftermath of DeMar's cardiac arrest and everything that took place schedule-wise. Are they still pissed off with how things went? Because it's over and done with now.
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, they are. I think they were still pissed off at the league. The Ravens had nothing to do with that proposal other than voting for it. Maybe that's what it was, just misplaced aggression. I mean, they were happy as can be. They were lighting cigars and dancing and thumping the music. It was a wild, happy scene in that locker room. And so that's why it just kind of struck me the tone they took there. And even, Jesse Bates saying, can't wait to send those guys home. I mean, these guys don't say inflammatory stuff like that. They're especially the older guys that have been around the league long enough and know better. It was, I think that might have played a role in it, that they were so pissed off during the week. And this was just a release of the joy of officially clinching, and then a release of the anger of what the position the league put him in.
Yeah, that Jesse quote was one that resonated with me as well, just because it wasn't all that long ago that the Bengals were essentially in rebuild mode, and you've been covering them like we've mentioned. So I do wonder, Joe's emergence and the Super Bowl run last year, and really this entire remake-up essentially of this organization. What's it been like in terms of their DNA now versus, gosh, even in 2019 when Lamar's MVP season, right? The Houdini, Kevin Harlan call and running up the score and all that stuff. Just how much have things changed there DNA wise over the last couple of years?
Oh yeah, I don't even know if night and day does it justice. It was, 2019, Zach comes in, talks about building this culture, and they had some close games, but they start 0-11, and then everybody's got their eye on that number one pick, and all Bengal fans see Joe Burrow as the savior, and can they finish it? Can they almost blow it? They go to Miami, they come back from a 23-point deficit to tie it and force overtime. And Bengal fans are like, what in the hell are you doing? They lose the game in overtime to clinch the number one overall pick. And it was just all focus on Joe Burrow at that point. He comes in, really starts playing well right before the ACL, and Bengal fans just have that complex, like, oh, here we go again. But since then, since the start of 2021, it has been unlike anything I've seen. I've covered this team on a beat every day basis since 2012. It was kind of a fly in here and there guy since 96. And it's just, even with Carson here, this Joe Burrow is just a different guy. He has totally changed the makeup, the mindset, everything about this team, and the fan base. I mean, the expectations for years was just win a playoff game. And then last year they win the first one, go all the way to the Super Bowl. Nobody's even talking about, can they win a playoff game this year? It's can they get to the Super Bowl? And it really has been remarkable. It just shows you what this league is, that if you get that guy at the quarterback spot, you've got a chance to put a Lombardi trophy in your building. And if you don't, you don't.
Quite literally why this is one of the most important off seasons in Ravens franchise history, but that's a conversation for another day, and one we'll definitely be having in a few short weeks from now, Jay, depending on how Sunday's rematch goes. But as someone who covers them year round, I'm interested to get your perspective on this. The cockiness versus confidence label is often attached to Joe for good and for bad. And all I'm going to say is, on the outside looking in, this dude's a dog. I love watching him, whether it's hold everything back, right, in his media sessions and try his best not to make a big storyline. I was thinking about that recently when they played the Bucs, right, in the Tom Brady matchup. Or even most recently, like, it's my whole career window in terms of, going for Super Bowls. So, him well. Cocky or confident?
Yeah, confident for sure. At times cocky. You know, his post-game press conferences are much better than his Wednesday press conferences because you're right. He tries not to make a story of anything, tries not to say anything. Last Wednesday was a little different. It was the best Joe Burrow press conference I've ever been in, but it was, that was in the middle of the DeMar Hamlin situation, and there was just a lot of raw emotion and a lot of him opening up and saying what was on his mind, and you don't get that from him a lot. But you when I guess when you can back it up on the field, then that cocksuredness doesn't bother people as much, and it sure as hell isn't going to bother Bengals fans. They love it. But you see him, it was that Pittsburgh game, they come back from the bye and they start rolling the Steelers in Pittsburgh, and he screams at the fans, "We the big dogs now." It's just the team gravitates toward that, the fan base gravitates toward that. It's what Andy Dalton never had. Andy Dalton was a solid quarterback where you had the pieces around him. He could take you into the playoffs. They just could never get over the hump. He wasn't that dynamic leader that Joe Burrow is. And it's just amazing what it's not like this coaching staff has given Joe Burrow control, but if he says something or if he wants something, he generally gets it. And I go back week 3, they were 0-2. And they started the Pittsburgh game really slow, make a great comeback only to lose in overtime, start the Dallas game really slow, overcome a double-digit deficit, come back and lose on a walk-off field goal. And I asked him in that press conference that Wednesday, I was like, I know it's not your choice, but if it was your choice, would you like to take the ball instead of deferring, just to go out and set a tone and try to play with the lead? And he's like, yeah, I would like to try that. They haven't kicked off to start a game since then. If they win the coin toss, they take the ball now, just because Joe Burrow said that in that press conference.
Wow.
Joe Burrow doesn't like to get under center. Since that week 5 game in Baltimore, he has hardly ever been under center. They basically changed their entire run scheme where now it's all shotgun runs, this downhill gap power run. And they immediately transformed themselves from a going nowhere run game to the number 1 run game efficiency-wise in the NFL. It's not a Baltimore run game where they're going to run it down your throat over and over again and run for all these yards, but it's when they run the ball, they're going to get 5 or 6, and they're going to be in 2nd and 4. Or if it's 2nd and 10, then they're going to be in 3rd and 4. They're going to be in these manageable situations, and it's just there so many times where Joe might even he's not making a demand. He just says something in passing, and they're like, well, let's see. He's our best player. Let's see if we can acquiesce here. And it even goes back to when they installed the offense with him as a rookie. They put in a lot of stuff that he did well at LSU just to try to ease his transition. And it's kind of remarkable for a young quarterback to have that much power.
Yeah, no kidding. Sounds to me like he's on the road to autonomy, deservingly so too, right? I mean, this guy is just electric out there and showed some slippery, some elusiveness in the pocket last Sunday, which I think Ravens fans were literally losing their minds about because of the lack of wrap-up ability by some of the outside linebacker play. Before we wrap, Jay, how concerned are you about this Alex Kappa loss? We already know Lyle Collins is down, so the right-hand side of that line seems a little vulnerable. How is depth in that category?
Yeah, it's a big deal because I just mentioned that run game where they ascended to the number 1 run efficiency team in the league, and now the last 4 weeks they are 31st in rush efficiency. Sorry, I can't talk. And 32nd in yards per carry. And Lyle Collins and Alex Kappa are their 2 best run blockers, and they're both on the same side of the ball. They're both on the right side of that offensive line. And anybody that watched that game Sunday knows that the Bengals had a hard time running the ball. Now, a lot of people have a hard time running the ball against the Ravens. That's an elite defense, but it's a big concern. And for what you mentioned as well, where Joe was running around in the pocket like crazy, and that was one of the strengths in his game coming out. That was an underrated strength, was his pocket presence and his ability to feel pressure and kind of slip tackles. He did take it to another level Sunday, and you wonder if he's going to have to do that again in this wild card game, because They have Hakeem Adeniji is playing right tackle. He started 13 games at guard last year, and he was part of that offensive line that they gave up 51 sacks in the regular season and 19 more in the playoffs, and just got abused by the Rams in the Super Bowl. Otherwise, they probably win that game. The filling in for Kappa at guard is going to be Max Sharping, who's an interesting situation. He was a 3-year starter in Houston, but he earned the performance elevator, the proven performance elevator, where his contract jumped to $2.5 million this year. The Texans wanted to get out from under that. They cut him at final cut down day, figured nobody else was going to want to grab that contract, and they were going to bring him back at a cheaper rate. And the Bengals claimed him on waivers, agreed to pay that $2.5 million. He's been sitting on he hadn't played other than a couple special team snaps all year. And now this insurance policy, they get to cash in. It's not some unproven guy they're putting in for Kappa, but it is a guy that hasn't played much this year.
Were they holding back a little bit offensively speaking on Sunday, knowing that in all likelihood at that time they were going to run it back a week later?
Yeah, you know, when they got up 17-0, Brandon Allen was warming up on the sideline, and you're thinking, ooh, that might be a little early for this. And I think if they had gotten one more score, they might have made that switch, and not just at quarterback, but at a lot of spots. But the Ravens started making a little bit of a comeback there, and I do think they didn't pull guys, but they definitely called plays differently offensively. There was a lot more. It seemed like every possession in the fourth quarter and even part of the third was just a matter of let's eat some clock. We don't care how much yards we gain. They weren't really that concerned about Anthony Brown and that offense making a rally to beat them. And there was a lot of wide receiver screens that really had no chance of going anywhere, and a lot of runs, even though they weren't running the ball well. It was just kind of hold it back and let's just try to get out of this game and move on to the wild card game, which they were able to do.
And that's where we obviously shift our focus to now. Before we let you go, one matchup that you're most looking forward to, because I know, look, one of those healthy scratches, at least we think he was a healthy scratch because he's missed the last few weeks, is Marcus Peters this past weekend. I expect him to be back out there on the outside along with Marlon Humphrey. And man, just knowing the outside threats that Cincy's offense presents, I'm looking forward to a few of those matchups, whether it's Chase versus Humphrey or Peters versus Boyd or Higgins. I mean, you name it. The reality is, Jay, that all three of those guys, if they were to come to Baltimore, all three would walk in and immediately be the number one guy. And I know that drives people nuts in this town because from a wide receiver standpoint, and I'm sure you're going to talk to Jeff about this week as well, there's just been such limited production for years now.
Yeah, the Bengals number 4 guy, Trenton Irwin, an undrafted free agent, he might start on that Ravens team. I don't know if he'd be number 1, but he'd be getting targets. You know, my eye goes to the other side. I feel like the Bengals are going to score 20 in this game. They find a way, no matter how good the other team's defense is, they're going to get in that 20 range. Can the Ravens get to 20? And I think a big part of that's going to be Mark Andrews. The Bengals have struggled to cover Andrews in the past. Last year they brought in Trey Flowers, claimed him off waivers from Seattle, kind of made him a tight end coverage specialist. He did a great job against Kelsey in a couple games. You know, is it going to be him? They drafted Dax Hill in the first round, a safety out of Michigan. He was basically an insurance policy against Jesse Bates possibly holding out, which Jesse didn't do. So Dax has hardly played at all. We saw him get in there and do some tight end coverage last weekend. So it's who are they going to put on Mark Andrews? Can they slow him down enough? Because as you mentioned, the Baltimore's receivers just don't scare you. And whether it's Lamar or whoever it is, if J.K. Dobbins is back and they've got that run game going, that's going to open things up. And Mark Andrews has burned this team in the past, and he alone could be enough to get the Ravens in that zone where they could possibly top 20. And if the Ravens defense can keep the Bengals right at 20, it wouldn't surprise me to see the Bengals lose this game.
Well, we'll see who's throwing the football to Mark Andrews out there.
Big question.
My gut tells me as we tape this before certain things have been decided, it's probably going to be Tyler Huntley, which is a whole lot better than QB3, as we all were reminded this past weekend in Cincy. But Jay, thanks so much for carving out some time for us here on the Vault. And before you wrap, just let everybody know where they can find you, where they can find your work on The Athletic, and anything else you'd like to plug.
Yeah, you can go to theathletic.com and go to the Bengals section. I'm on Twitter at JMorrisonATH. And then my partner on the beat, Paul Daner Jr., and I have a podcast. We record 3 or 4 shows a week. It's called Hear That Podcast Growling. It's on YouTube, Apple, Spotify, all the podcast platforms.
All right, good stuff there from you and Jay. Bobby, thanks for taking care of that interview for the both of us. But yeah, I think we're good on talking about all the back and forth and the cheap stuff and get more into the game here. I think Jay, pointed out that if there's a kink, right, in the Bengals armor, it's going to be on that right side of the offensive line. They're missing Alex Kappa, and who was the other guy they're already missing, Bobby?
Yeah, La'el Collins at the right tackle position. So if there's a vulnerable area, to your point, it's going to be the right-hand side of Joe Burrow's protection. So let's go, Ravens pass rush. Time to take advantage.
I know, right?
There.
And finish this time. Don't let Joe Burrow get slippery in that pocket there. It's the Ravens, most of their sacks feels like it comes in cleanup duty, right? Where there's no one guy that just like is not like a TJ Watt, right? That's like, I'm just going to beat my man and make this play all the way from start to finish on my own. It's usually like one guy gets pressure and it makes the quarterback have to move out of their pocket and kind of go right or left. And then that's when another outside linebacker or defensive lineman or whoever seems to clean up. So, they just got to finish it this time. If it's coming from that right side and constantly flushing them out to the left, then that's where you got to get some cleanup duty there. But if a couple of guys can actually take advantage of their, backups, then that's what you got to do, because the Ravens have had their backups. You take advantage wherever you can. So that's on that side of the ball. But we all know the Ravens have their own injuries they're dealing with that, is far worse than what the Bengals are dealing with.
Yeah, we'll get into that in a second, too. You got me thinking about this whole sack production or lack thereof. There's cleanup duty sacks, and there's also sacks that tend to come in bunches. And for the Ravens, I feel like that's been the story of their year. If it weren't for that half sack that Justin Houston was able to log that unfortunately kept him away from a big incentive, over $1 million incentive in that regular season finale, I don't think he would have recorded one since November. So that's kind of been the story, right? Like early on, we were talking about a group that was, top 5 in that category. And obviously there's been a visible improvement from a year ago, but they've definitely leveled off for sure in the last month or so.
Yeah, absolutely. And it can't, like this is going to be a defensive-minded game and a running the ball. That is the only path for the Ravens. We'll talk about in a second who's going to be at quarterback, but whoever it is, that's the path. And so you just cannot let Joe Burrow start connecting with Jamar Chase and T. Higgins and Hayden Hurst and Tyler Boyd. It wouldn't be fair. So, the more pressure they can get on there, the better.
As promised, let's shift gears into the quarterback discussion, because as we tape this, Lamar Jackson has missed 16 straight practices. We have not seen him. And people always kind of wonder, why do you count those? Because they're important, and it gives you context in terms of how cold he would be if he were to be asked to play, And so we have not seen him since the December 4th, Week 13 game against Denver, when he injured his knee, sprained the PCL. And as we've talked about really ad nauseum at this point, Sarah, we both believe that until proven otherwise, this is, simply put, something that was really, in terms of initial reports, initial indications, not as severe as it ended up being. And, that 1 to 3 week timetable from some of the national reporters initially looks like, light years ago at this point. And so, the swelling, the most recent reporting from Jordan Schultz of The Score indicated that he's still dealing with significant knee swelling. And so, he's just not ready to go, unfortunately. And so everybody that kind of wants to, I thought Rich Eisen put it really, really well. And you did a good job of putting this in Thursday morning's vault. But Rich says, when there's uncertainty in the sports world, really as in the world in general, whether it's the political sphere, whatever, when there's heavy uncertainty, when there's a lot unknown, we as human beings tend to lean on conspiracy theories because it gives us comfort, or maybe it gives us clarity. But in this case, we have no reason to believe that Lamar Jackson is using his setback, his knee injury, as a negotiation tactic in January. And that's just fact.
Yeah, and I think that Jim Trotter, also put it in a good way, that it's just like...
Oh, let me take the contract situation off the table for a minute. 2 weeks ago, I was at a game and a player unsolicited came up to me and asked me about Lamar. And he said to me, I sprained my PCL in week 1. He said, I'm still not right. He said, I came back only because our team is in the playoff hunt. He said, if Lamar has a grade 2 sprain, PCL sprain, he said, even if he gets back on the field for the playoffs, he is not going to be the same Lamar that we know. So from that standpoint, I think you could see I shouldn't say frustration, but you could see where John Harbaugh was on this, that there's really not a lot you can do physically if he is not ready. And clearly, physically, he is not ready. So I hate to hear the contract situation brought into this, because if you know Lamar, that's not what he's about in terms of he wants to be there for his guys. I remember going back to the day after the draft and saying to Lamar, if you have a chance for the Hall of Fame, a gold jacket, or a Super Bowl trophy, which would you take? And without hesitation, he said a Super Bowl Vince Lombardi trophy. Why? Because that means he has done something special for him and his teammates. So he is not that individual egotistical guy. I don't believe this is about contract. I believe this is truly about his health and him wanting to be right so that he can perform for his teammates.
Again, if Lamar was going to hold out, I really do think it would have been in training camp. And in terms of it, and it is exactly what you said with Rich Eisen, where like when things don't meet expectations, and because of those initial reports were like 1 to 3 weeks, and apparently John Harbaugh told Rich that he thought he could have been ready for that Browns game, but here we are in the wild card game, and he's still not there. So I get it. I get that it's like, well, hey, he could have been out there, but since he's not, it's got to be contract related. It's not a far reach to kind of make that conclusion. But the reason why I don't make that conclusion is based off of 3 things. Number one, consistent reports from several different reporters that there's still swelling in his knee. It wasn't just Schultz yesterday. I've seen other reports from that. Number 2, it is not Lamar Jackson's brand. It is not who he is. And I say that because all he wants to do is win Super Bowls. If he had the chance to go out and play in the playoffs after taking 4 weeks off, and when I say taking 4 weeks off, I'm saying that in terms of people's conspiracy that he's not coming back, not because he's injured, but because he's got it's because of his contract. Even if that were true, I still think he would come back because he wants a shot at a Super Bowl, But anyway, I think he loves football too much, and I think he loves his teammates too much to not go out there and battle with them. And then number 3, like I just think that people keep misconstruing that the Ravens aren't giving him a contract because they don't believe in him and that he still has to prove something to them. They don't. And that's what Rich Eisen was also getting back in that clip. Like legitimately, and this is why I don't, get angry. I think the Ravens love Lamar Jackson and have already decided that he's their guy. He's their guy. So then the question back is then why haven't they signed him? And it's not because of Lamar Jackson that they haven't signed him. It's because of the Cleveland Browns. That's it. They do not want to do bad business like the Browns do. And it's hard to be able to say, well, if they really loved him, they would pay that. And I just don't think that's true. I think they really do love him. And maybe, who knows? They need to get a deal done. But if it's going to be very interesting to see what happens with Joe Burrow and why is his name slipping me? Justin Herbert. Thank you, Justin Herbert. It's going to be very interesting what happens with those two if Lamar's not done yet, because if those two aren't fully guaranteed contracts, then that does 100% make the Cleveland Browns deal with Deshaun Watson an aberration. It 100% makes it a outlier. And so that's just it. I think two things are true at once. I think the Ravens love Lamar Jackson and want him back and would be willing to make him the highest paid in terms of annual money per year, but obviously not the richest in terms of fully guaranteed contracts. So I think they both absolutely love him, and two things can be true at once. At the same time, they do not want to be the Cleveland Browns and follow their business lead in making the decisions.
Sarah, I do believe that we will continue to look at the Deshaun with all these deals that are coming up that you mentioned, the Burrows, the Herberts. I do believe that it'll continue to be an outlier there in Cleveland. You know, everybody that wants to look at that as a record-setting or resetting deal that Cleveland made with Deshaun Watson, I don't think it'll be looked at that. I think it'll be looked at as a complete outlier, a complete aberration. But we'll see. Like you said, you know, there's more quarterback deals that need to get done before that can become a fact.
Yeah, and if they do end up getting fully guaranteed, then that's going to force the Ravens' hand for sure.
Exactly. That'll make the decision.
What's this debate? What's this hot debate you're talking about?
Yeah, so obviously, in all likelihood, with Lamar not available come Sunday night, the question becomes, who are you starting? You got two former undrafted rookies, obviously. One has more experience than the other, clearly, but he's also the one that's dealing with some shoulder flare-up in the right shoulder, some tendonitis. That's Tyler Huntley. Did not go in that regular season finale because of it, perhaps, or it was just a coach's decision based on them having a good understanding, a good grasp for where Lamar was, right? Maybe they've known all along that he was going to be a long shot for the playoffs, and maybe that was just part of John Harbaugh's rest strategy. We know he had to make that decision with several other key starters offensively. But the question becomes, are you going with Tyler if he's not even close to 100% with that shoulder? Or are you going with Anthony Brown, who showed some promise in the second half of his first career NFL start, which, of course, would make Sunday night under the primetime lights his second career NFL start?
All right. Well, first of all, the way you set that up is you said, would you take Tyler Huntley if he's not even close to 100%? So in that scenario, no. But if he's like 90%, yeah, I think I'm doing Tyler Huntley. I need some. This is going to be, if the Ravens have any chance, okay, because the defense did play a good enough game to win it. If you know there was any, you know, if the offense hadn't spotted them 21 points with turnovers, okay, the Ravens need somebody. If it's not going to be Lamar Jackson, the Ravens need a quarterback that is first and foremost not going to turn the ball over. That has got to be priority number one. And I feel like for the most part, it's not like he's been turnover free, but for the most part, I feel like Tyler Huntley has been clean with the ball. And so if he were 90, 95%, I think I'm taking Tyler Huntley. I prefer the experience. I prefer the fewer turnovers. And one half of football for me isn't enough to convince me that Anthony Brown is the better option over Tyler Huntley. So that's who I would, if I had the choice of a 90% Huntley or Anthony Brown, I'm going Huntley.
It's hard to disagree with that, you know, based on what you just presented there. I think the flip side argument that I've heard and read and seen in the last couple of days is that folks like the way that Anthony kind of sees the football field, his pocket awareness, his pocket presence. Mm-hmm. And I know we've discussed this in recent weeks that Tyler's Achilles heel has been his reads. So after the initial read, wherever the design play is for, you know, in terms of a pass catcher and passing situations, if it's not there, if he doesn't like it, if he doesn't think he can fit it in, the second read almost always is, I'm going to use my legs. I'm going to flush out to the right and run. Yeah. I'm going to scramble. And so I think we saw in the second half a little bit more ability to move the chains, to move the ball a little bit via the air, if I'm talking about Anthony. But at the same time, does that outweigh what Tyler's proven now? And, guys gotten double-digit games under his belt with Lamar being down in the last couple of years in crunch time. So I think if we're talking about, what outweighs one another, Sunday night with everything on the line in postseason play, experience outweighs a half. I'm with you.
Even with Tyler Huntley, the Ravens have been moving the ball. So, Ryan Mink had put out, the offensive yards per game with and without Lamar Jackson. He split it up from weeks 4 to 12. I don't know why he did 4 to 12 and not 1 to 12. But anyway, they were putting up 347 yards per game. And then weeks 14 through 18, so it's a little bit of both, but obviously more Tyler Huntley. They were moving the ball. They had 311.6 yards per game. So obviously it's dipped. I mean, you're going to dip with Lamar Jackson, but 35-yard difference isn't that bad. So, Tyler Huntley is moving the ball. What is the issue and what has always been the issue and was even the issue before Lamar went down for a couple weeks, and so this is on the whole offense and Greg Roman, it's the points per game. So points per game for weeks 4 through 12 was 22 points per game. And then the weeks without Lamar was 13. That's the dip, the 11-yard dip in points per game. So it's all about red zone. So, whoever's out there, Tyler, Lamar, Anthony, Greg Roman's got to be calling a good game in the red zone, and then they've got to execute, because I feel like with or without Lamar, they have been pretty good at moving the ball. They just have got to score when they have opportunities.
Here's what ESPN's Dan Orlovsky thinks about the quarterback situation with, again, in all likelihood, no Lamar being available Sunday night.
Very simply, if the Cincinnati Bengals don't turn the football over, the Ravens have no shot to win this game. They're too good of a team to go against. Now, defensively, how do the Ravens go about somewhat trying to slow down this offense? Number one, you have to live in 2 high quarters type of shell. But be aware that Joe in this offense is going to take their shots downfield. This is just a little underthrown by him last week. And I think the second thing is understanding that the right side of Cincinnati's offensive line is new. We talked about that yesterday. Attack it. Force those guys to communicate. Force those guys to pass things off. Force those guys to make sure that they're on the same level on a consistent basis. And this defense that Baltimore runs has those blitz packages. If I was Cincinnati, I would be sitting there going, what are you going to do to our right side? That's the only shot. I hate when analysts sit there and say, well, if they don't turn the football, because I think we have to be better than that. But it's very simply in this game. If Joe Burrow don't give the ball away, there's no shot Baltimore wins this game.
Yeah, I mean, that's exactly, what I feel like we just said, that it's like you can't turn the ball over. The offense isn't good enough to overcome spotting them points. I mean, unless the defense can get like a couple of pick sixes, or maybe we can get some kickoff returns for touchdowns. I mean, the offense isn't good enough to spotting them points. So they absolutely cannot turn the ball over. And Bobby, by the way, as you were playing that, I checked out Twitter. It was just announced, sorry, a bit of a topic change. Roquan Smith was just named the AFC Defensive Player of the Month. He's having a week, man. He's having a week. Signs a 5-year extension for $100 million. He was voted yesterday as the team MVP by the local media. That's the local media's award. And now he's named the AFC Defensive Player of the Month. Can we get that good juice going to where he actually wins a playoff game? Can we get that going?
Yeah.
I don't know. Maybe I'm asking too much here.
That's a big ask. You're also forgetting one thing, too, that made it a week, like an all-time week. His Georgia Bulldogs absolutely clobbered TCU in the national championship game. So, yeah, this dude's having a heck of a week. And matter of fact, we do got to give Rose some love, because all of his teammates, as you heard on this week's Morning Vault on Thursday morning, found out of his news through Twitter. Like, the guy was just so hush-hush about it. He's so selfless. He's so humble. And he talked about it during his first press conference after the record-setting deal?
Honestly, I don't really like a lot of attention. So, like, I don't like going around talking up myself, saying, hey, this, saying that about myself. So I figured the guys would eventually find out, and I was just going to let it come out when it came out. And I wasn't trying to be like the guy, like, hey, look at me, I did this, I did that, because that's not how I roll. And those guys know that as well, but just happy to be here. I don't think it's really sunk in, but, like, man, it's crazy just knowing, like, you know, where I grew up at, and, like, such a small town, such a small rural town, Southwest Georgia, Marshallville, Georgia, population like 1,100 right now, no stoplights, anything. So just being a kid from that environment and just, you know, putting my mind to things and just knowing that anything is possible if you put your mind to it. And for all the kids back where I'm from in Macon County and all, like, just knowing that there's so much more out there in life outside of what's in that small town. And, man, thankful for everyone that's helped me be in this position that I'm in, and, like, making my dreams come true and living it out, man. But it's an amazing feeling, and I feel like I'm just getting started, and I just want to continue to do my best and just keep getting better year in and year out to bring many championships here.
So again, I mean, we're starting to kind of really see this whole nickname, right? The Uncle Roe nickname. He's an old soul, and really just at his core, he's a humble dude who earned every penny of this new deal over the last 9 games since they acquired him pre-deadline.
Yeah, I mean, listen, he 1,000% earned the deal that he just got, 1,000%. It was an excellent trade by Eric DaCosta, who I feel like has had very good mid-season trade deadline trades, and it's just, this is another one. And for them to lock him up before the season ends, that is really good news, and it allows them the franchise tag on Lamar Jackson. So excellent move for them to trade for him and then get the deal done a couple weeks later. So, Bobby, let's wrap this up. Let's head into why don't you give me your key matchup of this game?
Yeah, well, we've already mentioned it, and two, just for starters, you know, our email inbox is full right now. What we're going to do, just for timing purposes and being that potentially the season could be over this Sunday night, we're not sending any bad juju, bad mojo, but we're going to do a big email Q&A episode, like fully designed to answering listener questions next week. So hit us up with your questions via email at BaltimoreRavensVault@gmail.com. We'll get to as many as we possibly can coming up next week. Now, with that in mind, the matchup, I mean, we've already kind of noted it, right? The right-hand side of Cincinnati's offensive line is vulnerable, and their depth is going to be tested. So I think, you know, hey, the left-hand side of Baltimore's defensive line has to answer its test. I'm talking about Justin Madubuike for some interior pressure. Calais Campbell could be playing in the final game of his future Hall of Fame career. I expect him to be playing super inspired football. JPP's got to keep sipping from the fountain of youth. They're going to need all the interior pressure, all the edge pressure that they can possibly bring and throw at Joe Burrow, because we know how cool he is in the pocket, and that's got to come early in offense era in order for a piece of the formula. There's multiple layers of this formula for a win. That's got to be at the top of the list.
Yeah, 100%. That is, you know, the matchup to watch. But just to give another one on the offensive side, I've said already that I think it's like it's got to be the run game. The run game's got to get going. J.K. Dobbins has got to get going. Let's see if Gus Edwards gets out of concussion protocol. Hopefully, first and foremost, he's feeling okay. And then second of all, that he could get back, because they're going to need that two-headed monster. So, but I'm going to be looking at Tyler Linderbaum and DJ Reader. I thought Linderbaum did a great job on Reader. Reader wasn't available for the first matchup. He was for the second. And DJ Reader is one of the, you know, really good defensive tackles in this league. So let's keep that up. Let's win in the trenches, starting with Linderbaum versus DJ Reader. Let's open things up and let's get that run game going.
All right, my prediction for this one is Cincinnati 24, Baltimore 20. I think it's going to be a lot closer than folks are going to predict on the national scene, because the Ravens are going to come in and play with a lot of pride. They're obviously ticked off. Both sides are ticked off, but ultimately Cincinnati's firepower is going to be just too much to keep up with, offensively speaking, when we know that points have come at a premium And it's been very, very, very difficult to score points ever since Lamar Jackson went down well over a month ago. So I will go with Cincy. They're going to dance on past the wild card, and then all of a sudden you and I are going to be fully entrenched in an offseason full of storylines.
Yes, we for sure will. Bobby, I'm also predicting a Cincy win. I'll go 27-17. I'm just not sure the Ravens can get enough offense without Lamar Jackson. But let me say this. You know, at the end of those NFL Network preview games, they put up all the predictions from their experts. I mean, there's like a good 12 guys, okay? They put that graphic up, and that graphic, all 12 has the Bengals. And even though I'm also predicting a Bengals win, you better believe if the Ravens somehow, by some miracle, pull off the upset, I will be tweeting out that graphic and showing how the Ravens overcame everybody's disbelief, including my own. So I would love for them to prove me wrong. It would also be so sweet after all the trash talking and all of that to somehow be able to pull this off. But I am not predicting it. 27-17 Bengals.
If you end up tweeting out that graphic, I know you have plenty of design experience. I'm going to need you to edit it and put in both of ours predictions so that we can be held accountable.
Do it.
Yes, we need to be held accountable.
Good.
But yeah, hey, I think this is going to be a heck of a game. You know, the Ravens defense is a prideful group, and they've shown us for weeks now, if not over a month, that they are fully capable of keeping this team in games, even with a shell of itself offense without Lamar. So if that proves to be true, it's going to be another good one. It's going to be another classic AFC North game under the lights. So again, hit us up with your questions at BaltimoreRavensVault@gmail.com. We'll get to as many as we possibly can in a special Q&A episode that I hope isn't the first of our offseason, but you never know. It may end up being the case. And of course, partner, you and I will be back for our instant reaction episode on Sunday night. It's going to be a late one. Kadri and I will be streaming pregame from 3 to 5 at Pickett Brewing Company on Paca Street, just outside M&T Bank Stadium. If you want to come down, the projectors are going to have the postseason games on, whoever's playing at that point on Sunday. And then, of course, you and I will be back as soon as this one finishes up, which will probably be after midnight on technically Monday morning. So we'll look forward to that. And with that, we're going to close it down on this postseason game preview episode here on the Ravens Vault podcast. If you haven't already done so, please consider subscribing to our YouTube channel and letting everybody know, and a friend, a Ravens group message, whoever, Ravens Roost group, you name it, what we're building here on a daily basis on the Ravens Vault. Thanks so much for being with us, and we'll talk to you soon.